Once again, hi everyone. Thanks again for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome. So during this interactive speaker panel tonight, what we'll do is we'll cover this amazing and important topic of how to transition into UX. Pretty challenging thing to do, but we'll explore it in quite a lot of detail. So we've invited some awesome folks that you guys have seen who have successfully transitioned into UX and who will share the insights from their journeys with you and answer some questions as well. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael. I'm the founder of BeginX. BeginX is a UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their jobs. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, of course, but just wanted to give you guys a bit of a background for credibility purposes. So we've run many cohorts so far and helped over 100 people get hired into UX roles. So here are some companies that they were hired by. So basically, we've seen lots of people go through this entire UX transition. Before we jump into discussion, let's quickly set the stage and cover a few of these quick concepts. That will, what that will do is that will help guide the discussion effectively, okay? So, and by the way, we'll share a handout at the end of this event as well, so stick around if you'd like to download that, okay? Cool. So basically, this sounds somewhat common sense in a way, but you would be surprised how many people make this mistake, right? So essentially, this first step is starting with the end in mind, right? So understanding where exactly you need to get and to be that highly hireable candidate by employers, right? So that employers actually want to hire you, and then figure out how exactly you will get there, right? So essentially what you want to do is UX this whole career transition journey and think from the standpoint of the employer themselves, okay? So you want to become a candidate who employers look at and think, this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to the company, right? So, and they need validation and proof that you can actually do that, right? Which they look for when recruiting and evaluating your application, right? So here's a quick overview of the key competencies that you guys need to gain. We'll explore all these areas in more detail on the following slides, okay? So in summary, right on the left, you'll see hard skills, right? Just the ability to do UX work itself, softer skills, real experience, 3+ case studies. Usually we recommend a couple of those being with real clients to make sure that you can stand out and have a competitive advantage. Portfolio that shows the case studies, skills, and experience. Resume and online presence that tell your story well and positions you well. UX interviewing and story mastery, right? So that's very important. A lot of people get stuck in there. Mastery of effective UX jobs or strategies as well. So basically, focus on what is effective. You'd be surprised how many people focus on everything, right, instead of focusing on what actually works. So next, how did we actually come up with this stuff, right? So definitely not out of thin air, right? So here's what we did. So we interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates, identified who had the most success in getting hired faster and why, then interviewed around 30 employers and hiring managers or so to understand what they're looking for, analyze job postings to identify typical employer requirements, and probably ran by now over, it says 50, but probably by now over 70 or 80 events with both candidates and employers, interviewed them and gained insights on what works best, right? So essentially what we did is just use the UX process and did a ton of research to identify the key roadblocks that people experience in this transition journey and gain insights on what is needed in order to design a better way to solve these problems and make this transition effectively, right? So if you're a UX designer, you UX the transition. Then we also synthesized all of that research and identified some common themes. And again, one of the key takeaways is just to start with the end in mind and clearly understand what you need to achieve to be really attractive to employers, so you can actually get hired and not just learn a lot of stuff and then get stuck, okay? So understand how exactly you can get there, right? So this is just basically the first step, right? We're gonna go through this quickly, the key steps in this roadmap. So basically, you know where you need to be. Now let's explore a simple framework for how you can actually get there, right? So here's a high-level overview. We'll dive into each of these phases in a bit. First, you learn the essentials and foundations, right? So that's pretty straightforward. Key principles, concepts, the UX process, main methods, deliverables, tools, etc. Right? Next, you basically call this step major step, practice and grow. This is probably the longest and practical phase where most of your real learning, skills, and experience building will take place. So this phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things in more depth in the process, advancing your skills, and building real experience. Okay. The next phase is about creating all the search assets, right? So the essential involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, and online presence. Key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate for your job search, right? So you really want to master this before jumping into search. Okay, and the final phase is search prep and execution, which involves learning and mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process, and prior to kicking off your search. Okay, to make sure that you're prepared. Cool. So we found that a lot of people really like this product or service analogy, right? So basically, the first two phases are actually quite similar to building a product, and we call them learn and build stage, right? And after that, the last two phases are very similar to marketing and selling of that product, right? So that is what we refer to as, that's how we refer to this stage. Essentially, the first big mistake that people make is they do not really build a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills efficiently, or you do not have any experience. And if the product is not great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it. Okay, so even if you're a master marketer, it's going to be pretty tough. The other big mistake people make is after building an amazing product, they do not devote much time to actually really understand what marketing and sales is all about, right? So they think that just having the skills and experience is enough, and then it's just a matter of applying to tons of jobs, meaning they do not really understand any of the science behind the marketing and sales and what those are. So which means they do not put enough effort in order to position themselves as an attractive candidate and do not learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate the hiring process successfully, right? And if you do not do that, you can also get stuck looking for jobs for a very, very long time. And we've seen tons of examples like that, if you even get there at all. Okay, and this slide, you can basically see how the key competencies you need to gain map nicely into the transition journey. So you see when you can attain which competencies, right? So this is essentially a high-level view of what you need to have to be a highly hireable candidate, and when you at what phase in the process you can actually attain that. Okay, so before we jump into this panel, just a quick summary, right? And this framework will just help guide our discussion, make sure we address all these key different areas. So one is starting with the end in mind, understand where exactly you need to basically be highly hireable by potential employers and how you'll get there. Ensure you have a solid product before selling, otherwise you can waste months or even years. Once you have a solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind marketing and selling in order to get hired faster. Okay, so, and it's important not to confuse what phase you're in, right? So understand where you are and what may be blocking you from making progress, and focus on what is most important at that moment. So do not spread yourself too thin, doing too much at one time, as that will yield very little progress. With that said, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Anyone can jump in who wants to start.
All right. Hi, I'm Kristen. I've gone through BeginX, Michael's program, which was wonderful. I started off as a graphic designer, and I ended up bartending for quite a while, and actually managing the bar that I was working at. I think it was like 7 years of doing that. And then when I heard about UX, I thought that it sounded pretty perfect for me. Just made a lot of sense for the way that I operate and think about things. And I got my certification at FIT, and then I joined BeginX. And then I ended up getting a job thanks to that. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's me. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
Hi everyone, I'm Mara. I've always done design. I graduated from RISD in 2014 and did 5 years of apparel design in New York before deciding to jump into UX design. I did a couple months of self-study before I found Michael's Career Accelerator. Um, and I thought it was a great program because they sort of just guide you through the process. I didn't need anyone to teach me like the technical skills because I'm mostly self-taught. And so I completed that, and then I recently got a job shortly after we finished in March. And yeah, now it's like I got it in May, March, April, May. Yeah, that's like 2 months after. So yeah, thank you, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara.
And I'm Stacey. I spent a lot of my career in marketing and design and art direction, that kind of thing. But I had this craving for something that was a little, or actually user-centered rather than more marketing-centered, if that makes sense. And I thought UX would be wonderful. And I did a lot of research on which classes to take or what boot camp to take. I did take a few other boot camps and found the isolation of working with myself, being self-taught, and with also having just a single mentor, it just didn't feel like I was growing and learning from a team. So I discovered BeginX. I took the classes with a cohort, and it was an amazing experience because you're working with people that have a lot of different skill sets and a different way of thinking about things. And it's always been my experience that when people collaborate and come from different disciplines, the product is always better when you're working together and you have the same goal. So we had a wonderful group. The team, I learned so much from them and from the mentors and from Michael. So after that, we graduated and I ended up getting a senior UX position at Verisk, and that's an insurance company.
Thank you, Stacey. So as you guys can see, all of these folks are our grads. However, that doesn't mean we're going to be talking about the program or whatever, right? We're going to be talking about the career transition, all the different phases we mentioned, I talked about earlier, right? And how you can navigate each of those effectively. Okay. So just to clarify. So here's the first question for you guys. We start all the way at the beginning. How do you actually know if you should become a UX designer?
You need to enjoy problem solving, I think, is one big thing, and you also have to really enjoy process. I think being familiar with design process in general is really useful. And if you want to sort of marry design, analysis, and data together, then that's kind of UX.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's very true. I agree with that. Like the problem solving thing. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm like always someone who sees the problem like on a website, or like, I'm always like, why is it like that? Like, why is this experience so frustrating? Like, and I would like always want to know how could that be better? Like I'm always annoyed on like having to type every letter into like, Netflix and like stuff like that. Like I'm like, this is terrible UX, like, or any government website you've ever been on in your whole entire life. And it's like, why is it like this? Like, so I feel like if you're someone who picks up on things like that and you get affected by why experiences aren't good, I feel like that's a sign that you might possibly be good at UX, because you see how things could be a better experience, with digital products, like more specifically, but really with anything. That's what I noticed about myself. I would always pick up on that. So.
I think I would agree with both of those answers. And I would just say that I think that there's a lot of noise in the world, and there's a lot of noise coming from marketing in general. And I think that the thing that drove me to UX was a desire to take some of that, to just like take some of that noise out, and make it more about what people needed rather than what other people told people they needed, and make that experience more joyful and more, just more enjoyable generally. And I think that UX does that. If done right, and you're thinking about how to optimize an experience so that people love interacting with your product, and that then I think UX is probably something that you would be interested in.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I know this is like the first kind of a background conceptual question, but it's definitely very important, right? Because I mean, you obviously want to make sure that you're moving in the right direction, right? If UX is something you're considering, right, obviously you don't even, I mean, yeah, the pay is good, etc., but you don't want to like hate 70% of your life, right? So make sure that you're moving in the right direction and kind of assess yourself. So next question for you is, what's, in terms of hard skills, what do you really need to, basically, what type of hard skills do you need to get a UX design job?
I think you have to know, I mean, I guess, I don't know, personally, I do think you have to have experience with some design programs. Like, they really come in handy, because usually you're using prototyping tools, but like, and those are kind of, you can kind of learn those. But if you have no idea if you've never used a design program, like if you've never used Illustrator or Photoshop or something, or InDesign, I think it might be a little difficult for you. But it's still doable. I mean, you could just take a class on it, but and there's tons of tutorials online. But I think like hard skills, I think that's one of them. And just, it depends on the job. But for me, that's what I found. Most jobs would require some amount of knowing how to, put things together, and even like Miro and different things when you're doing brainstorming. That's all things you can learn, all that stuff. And it also depends on what area you're going into. Like if you're going into research, you might not have to know those design programs, but it depends on what you're going for. But if you're doing a general kind of UX role, I do think that those programs do help, personally. I don't know if you guys agree, but.
Yeah, I think CADing is a hard skill you definitely need. I've used it in every design job I've had in apparel, and I started out as a CAD designer at Pink, Victoria's Secret. And all I did was CAD, but that really helped me with all the other jobs I later got in apparel, even though the brands were more startup-ish and not really so technically inclined. Knowing how to CAD helps you to really understand a lot of the design tools in UX. And once you know one, you kind of know them all.
Yeah.
Set up the same way. And they're built to be intuitive anyway, so you'll pick up on it really fast.
I don't know if this is a hard skill, but I think it's important. And I think that collaboration and being able to collect data, analyze it, and then see where people, there's things that are standing out, being able to discuss these, trying to troubleshoot the questions that may come up. I think that's a skill. I don't know if it's a hard skill, but it's definitely something that helps with UX, being able to look at information and try and parse that information so that you can get the best kind of solutions to what you're driving at. I agree definitely that knowing some kind of prototyping software would be a good hard skill to have. I think you're going to be asked whether you have that when you go on an interview, whether you can use Axure or Figma or Sketch or something. So I would say absolutely that's a hard skill that you would probably need. I can't imagine that anyone would say that you don't need that when they're interviewing. And I think just being able to ask questions and listen to the answers, that's not a hard skill, but it's still an important skill. Like being able to listen is definitely an important skill in UX.
Can I just say something about that? This pandemic was almost like it taught me. Michael knows like how to like stop talking sometimes because like everybody cuts each other off on these remote programs.
Mm-hmm.
We would all just be talking and no one would be making any sound, and I'm like, oh, I need to just stop talking now. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually taught me a little bit about how to listen.
So, anything else you guys want to mention? So just besides the actual tools, right? Just kind of maybe talk more about the UX process, main methods. I mean, that is obviously important to know, right? Ability to do research, to do, user flows. Anything else you guys want to mention?
Yeah. I mean, you just mentioned two really important things: being able to do the user flows, but also being able to understand where the pain points are. So that usually comes with journey maps. You want to be able to define personas, whatever that looks like. I mean, there is this argument that there are arguments about pro and con for personas, but you really do need to understand your user and what their pain points are. So having a really good idea of what that user is definitely important. So those are a few really important things.
Thank you,
And
Stacey.
understanding like architecture of, like essentially when you start a project, you want to funnel everything down to the end product, So knowing the steps that you need to take to get there are really important, because you can't skip over. Sometimes you can, it depends on the project, but if you skip over something like a journey map or a site map, you're kind of doing a disservice to yourself, because that's all taking you to the next step, which is making it user friendly, and which is making it personalized towards exactly who the persona who's going to be using the product is. So I think information architecture is really important, for sure.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize it, right? I know this is not the biggest pain point for most people who transition, right? You kind of understand, okay, what is the UX process? What are the different skills? I just want to kind of touch on it and maybe do a quick recap, right? So obviously you need to basically understand what UX process is, what the key phases are, right? And starting from research, moving to information architecture, mapping everything out with user flows, kind of doing wireframing prototyping. And then after that, coming back to doing more research, usability testing, and then visual design can also be helpful. We'll touch on that a little bit later. So that's just a very high-level recap, just in case anyone is not familiar with that, right? So just kind of key areas, key phases of the UX process, right? I know this is pretty basic, but I want to make sure we kind of start at the ground level here. What do you guys think is the best way to actually obtain those skills? What I just mentioned, what you talked about?
Personally, I like doing a lot of research and reading and like watching videos about UX. So like on YouTube, I'll find something there if I need something. If I need help with something technical, like there's so many like design program how to do videos. I'm sure you guys have seen them. There's for like Adobe, Figma, Sketch, and like every other design program out there. And it's free, so there you go. And then there's Z Library also. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but you can download pretty much any book you want, and I'm obsessed with it. I download so many books like every night because you can. And then when I get around to it, I'll read it. But yeah, that's how I get my knowledge, and I just soak it all in. And then I sort of apply that in like a real world scenario. Previously at Michael's BeginX course, and now in a job.
Thanks, Mark. Kristen, Stacey, any other?
I think you need, I do think people want to know that, well, first of all, UX is something that it's like we were all saying, it's things like knowing what a problem is and what's best for somebody. And there's you might all know how to do that, right? I mean, like as a bartender, I like knew how to do that stuff. Like I could read the room, I could do all that. But you do need to go, I think you need some proper training. I got a certification at FIT and it was great. It just kind of took all the things I knew and organized it into a professional path, and step by step. So I suggest getting a certification, and they're pretty, because sometimes I did FIT, it was like 3 months, and the price was pretty good. I just put it all on a credit card, whatever. And then after that, I did the beginnings, which was a real life experience, which is what you need. So altogether, I mean, that's kind of all I think that's all you kind of would need to do, and things on your own time. But I think you do need some certification, and you do need some schooling. But you don't have to go for 4 years. These are like 3-month programs. And Michael's was, and so was the FIT certification was, they were at night, and it was like once or twice a week. So it was very, very easy to do on top of my other job. So.
Thanks, Kristen. So Stacey, how did you obtain the initial hard skills? What are some of your tips?
Yeah, I think it depends on your personality. If you're really good at self-pacing and giving yourself goals and meeting those goals, you can do class. I would recommend doing class. I would recommend taking a class. So yeah, definitely. So there's different ways you can go. You can do these classes where it's just you and you take the classes as you want to and you guide yourself through them. And it can take anywhere between a month to 4 years, depending on how motivated you are and your learning style. Or you can go to a boot camp of some type and have a little bit more interaction with your peers and other people who are struggling with it and have insights that could motivate you and help you. And then there's the mentor interaction, which is really valuable because I think, at least for me, even having been in the design and marketing industry for so long, when I went into UX, I did struggle with the, what do they call that? Faker syndrome. Like I'm going into UX and I get imposter. And there's a nice, it's nice to have someone to talk to about where you're going and who can see how far you've come and then, say, look, you're doing a great job or you need to work on this. And so it really does depend on your personality type. But I would say that you really do need to take some classes because you are going to get asked about principles of UX design. You're going to be asked about what the processes are, where your strengths are, whether you validated these prototypes, etc. And if you don't understand the language and you don't understand the processes, you will struggle to get a job because it's necessary to know these skills and to know how to talk in this space.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, me too. For learning the language, I go to Spotify. They have a ton of podcasts for like UX.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
And I just like listen to it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll steal that phrase.
It sounds really good on an interview. So like, it does. My first interviews, I was like, yeah, I can like do it, I guess, or whatever. No, just kidding. But I wasn't. I'm like, oh no. So I just started watching. Or just listening to people talk about it. Like you said, it does help. It's so true.
I would also say Medium. I read a lot of Medium articles. There's a lot of really, really insightful information on Medium. They have a UX collective there. They can send you updates every week and you can just save them if you don't have time to read them all. But it's been great reading the, this information, anything from how to validate your prototypes to how to interview to how to set up your portfolio. There's so much information there. So I would recommend Medium as well.
Cool. Thank you, Stacey. What do you guys think in terms of the UI and visual design skills? So for those, especially for those who may not want to kind of be doing UI design, right? How important do you think those are if you're, say, maybe you're looking to do just research or information architecture, kind of just being a classic UX role?
I would say it's quite valuable because you still need to understand visual composition and balance on a page, even if you're just laying it out, which is what you'll be doing when you're wireframing. And colors do help, and like research has shown that there is like color psychology and things like that. So it's not just aesthetic. There is a psychology behind it. Yeah, so I would say that having some sort of visual design background or doing some research and brushing up on those skills might be a good idea.
Thanks, Mara.
Yeah, I was going to say, personally, I do a little bit more UI. In my current role at Johnson & Johnson, there's a ton, it is UI leaning. So for me, it was very important. But I would agree with what Mara said, because there's something about the visual is the end result, right? And you want it to be friendly, you want it to be a good experience, and that's a big part of it. Like even the research is going to end up the visual. So it's really, I think it's important, as I said, like having the hard skills of using the design programs. I really do think that it's very important. So if you're not looking for UI, I still feel like you should take some classes, just a tutorial online.
It's funny. I mean, because I've always been a visual designer and I was a fine art major as well at one point, I would say that I would probably lean more towards it's not necessary if you're thinking more on the research side, simply because it's not that it's not, I would say that you don't necessarily need the skills to do UI. You might want to understand color theory, you might want to understand spatial theory, and then sizing and why bigger sometimes is better for buttons because of being able to click on them depending on the medium. But I wouldn't say that you have to be a designer so much, just understand the concepts and the theories behind how UI makes something more enjoyable or more usable, and go with that, because then you get into this space where people are trying to hire these unicorn UX professionals where they can do research and they can ideate, they can define, they can prototype, and they can test. Sometimes they want you to even code a little bit, and generalist is great. I mean, that's generally what I do, but that's a rare designer, that's a rare UXer. And I would say that if you don't have the UI, if that's not your goal, then you have a lot to learn right now. And I would probably say concentrate on what you want to do rather than trying to be everything. And that might make me the outlier, but that's my answer.
Yeah, that's good. Those are all good points. Yeah, I think in terms of like what we notice over like by analyzing like lots of people, UI is usually, I mean, it can be, even if you're not planning to do UI initially, it is important, right? To get in, to kind of get it that first role. Usually, not for every single role, but you basically open up more roles for yourself, right? If you have that skill, right? And that way you can get your foot in the door. And then once you're in, then you can it's easier to move around, and the more experience you build, the kind of goes the other way, right? Where employers are looking for you, and not you looking for employers, right? So I know Stacey touched a bit about coding as well. So what do you guys think? Are coding skills important too? Front end coding, maybe?
No.
Oh, I think
That's like the shortest answer ever.
I think it depends on what software you're using to prototype. I mean, there's certain prototype software that that knowing a little bit of code helps. Like Axure is something that's very code based, and I think it just knowing how things are interactive does help with the UX, because then you understand how things move and interact. But I wouldn't say you need to code, but I would say understanding it, just like understanding the theory of color or space, et cetera. I think it's good to know.
I would actually say it's really, really important to be understand it, like, hugely. I mean, because I work so closely with development. It's like we have every month we have sprint calls that basically, like, I don't know what every job is going to be different, but usually you're going to be someone's going to end up building your stuff out, right? And if you're constantly giving them things that are impossible, it's not good. Like, you know what I'm saying? You can't just make everything pretty and make this for me. Like, there's a lot of restrictions, but there are things like rich text editors and different things that do require small amounts of, like, a little bit of code knowledge, but it's so easy you could just go and find those things online. But just to know how to go online to look at something to find the answer is helpful. Like, I don't think everybody needs to know how to code, but, like, if you wanted to make something a red text, maybe how could you find that out quick? Just maybe look it up. I don't know. Like, as we were saying, it depends on the job, but I think it's really just to know how to speak with the development team and prod and, like, production and development is really good, because then they're more willing to help you, first of all. Like, if you don't kind of give them things constantly, that won't work. You just want to make everybody's job a little easier for themselves. So it's nice to know how to speak that language, I think.
Okay, so that's cool. Yeah, that's kind of what we found as well, right? So it's, to kind of summarize it, you don't have to be a developer, right? But it's important to understand a little bit, at least, so you can communicate with developers effectively, right? So it's you don't have to take like a 3-year course, right? You just need to pick up a little bit of front end, which is HTML, CSS, maybe even JavaScript. This should not be the first thing you learn, right? Obviously. This is something you do a little bit later, once you're, like, pretty much have everything in that product part that we talked about. But it's it can be definitely useful. So what about software skills? What software skills do you think are most important in your opinion, and why?
Curiosity and motivation, I think, are two really good ones. You always have to be constantly learning and be eager to learn. And just kind of not worry so much about asking questions. So just, like, ask them, because everyone's really generous in this industry. I've found it's not it's not like in other industries, I guess. Everyone in this industry is, like, so helpful and, like, so nurturing, and they just want to help you grow as a person and in your career.
Thanks, Mara.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Mara. People are really cool in the industry and helpful. It's true.
So
yeah, I would agree with Mara. I think curiosity is really important. I also think, the desire to find why things, or understand the why of things, and maybe what's not working, and then really dive into that as much as you can. If you like puzzles or, solving things, I think that's a great soft skill, because that kind of curiosity and that need to understand why things work or why things aren't working does drive a lot of UX. And I also think, like I mentioned earlier, that being able to listen, understanding how to read people when you're talking to them is, it is valuable. And knowing when to stop talking.
Yeah,
Stacey, I think you're so right about that. Like, I was gonna say the puzzle thing. That's so funny. I had the interview that got me this job. I actually mentioned that I loved those like metal puzzles. You know, those ones that are like horrible and no one can ever figure them out. And every once in a while, like you do it and you're like, I don't know. I love them. They sell them at like Barnes and Noble. But I said how that's what I like to do. I think they're fun, and it's kind of that's so funny that you said puzzle because it's so true. And reading the room, as you said, is like that is so important. Like knowing the conversation and the way to speak to say another coworker versus like a product owner versus like a stakeholder or your boss, like knowing or like someone that you're doing a user testing with, you want to very much make sure that you're like not making anyone feel weird, and you want to like get on the level and like make everyone comfortable. And I love those user interview calls because I'm like so like, oh yeah, whatever, you could say whatever you want, you're not offending me, like whatever, and just like really just try and make everybody kind of not feel on the spot or uncomfortable.
Did employers ask you guys during interviews about like these softer skills, or like what other ones, maybe like presentation or teamwork or collaboration, or like what else was mentioned that you think is important?
I would say storytelling is really important. Understanding how to define that experience that you're trying to solve for in a story that is compelling, so that everybody on the team, whether it's a stakeholder or a client or whomever, understands what's at stake, and they can empathize with that problem as well. Because if you can't tell that story in a way that makes it feel like they want to help you solve it, then you could be fighting a battle or having to work harder at trying to get people on board. So storytelling, I think, is really important. I do think authenticity is really important. Being honest with, well, I guess just generally being honest, right? You want to generally be honest. Don't say that you can do something you can't do outright. Say I've had some kind of experience with it. I know that I've had this and that's related, so I'm sure I can handle that, but that might be a little tangential, but yeah.
Adding on to the storytelling, I think being able to articulate your design decisions and being able to properly defend it is really important also. It can be a little nerve-wracking to be in like a critique setting, but you kind of just have to get used to it and get used to getting all sorts of feedback and just see everything as constructive criticism. But just make sure you learn how to articulate what you did and defend it, because yeah.
That's a really good point. That was like, I went into a meeting because and I made a catalog and they wanted like images in every box, and I was like, that can't. But I didn't design it that way. But I didn't. It was like, but I didn't defend myself. Like I was like nervous, so I was like, oh, okay. And my boss was later like, it's okay. You made that decision for a reason. Like the experience is better without that. So then the next time I had, this was like when I first started, I was a little hesitant to like push back, but that's very true. It's hard to do. And I'm not a shy person, and it is still hard to do, to like stand up to not stand up, not argue with somebody, but just to be like, this is the reason I did this. This is why I think it will be a better experience. And even if it doesn't go along with someone's suggestion,
But I think that's the thing that makes UX special, at least in my experience, from coming from marketing, where quite often it's the person that has the loudest voice in the room is the direction you go, or whether it's position or whatever. UX is based on what's best for the user. And so it's not subjective. It's based on research and based on what's needed. And I think that out of everything that I love about UX, that's my very favorite thing. You know, you can say, I made these decisions because research proved that this is the best way. And we can test it. We absolutely can test these ideas. But it's not about your opinion or subjective opinion.
Mhm.
It's about what's best for the user.
Yeah.
Yes, something because Stacey, you mentioned storytelling, right? So when we interviewed tons of employers, that was definitely like one of the most important things, right? So you guys would be doing a lot of presenting, right? Even though if it's not, may not be like a huge group of people, right? But you'll be constantly presenting your work, right? So presentation skills and storytelling is just huge, along with some other themes like we constantly hear empathy, right? That's obviously one of the really important ones. And facilitation, kind of ensuring that meetings are effective, and obviously being a team player, right? So because I assume you guys would probably working in a team setting, right? And when employers are hiring and interviewing, right, they're definitely looking for a fit and for someone who can play well with others, right? And who can kind of demonstrate that. So.
Yeah.
So I want to take a quick, couple of quick questions from the audience, because I know we have this one question here at the top that Grace asked, right, that has 5 upvotes, right? So, and by the way, if it's the audience, so you guys, if you see, feel free to upvote more questions. If you really see something that resonates and you really want to learn about, click that upvote button to make sure we are able to get to that question. And that question is, what was the hardest part of the transition into your first UX role?
Just believing that you can do it. That was the hardest part for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm all for hard work. I'm definitely, I love digging into a new challenge. It's just the confidence that comes with saying, I can do this. That was hard for me. And I'm not sure why, but I did struggle with that. And that, that's a very personal answer, but it's my answer. That was the hardest part for me. If you're willing to put in the work, I guess it depends on every individual person, would be different. But.
That's a good question. I'm just like thinking about it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, I think it was just, well, for me, as I said before, I was a bartender for years. And that's a whole different lifestyle. I mean, that's, that's like late night. I mean, before the pandemic, like it was, we would work till like 4:00 in the morning and it was just a whole different world. So for me, it was basically just changing the way my whole life in a way, like everything about it was the hardest thing. like it was so hard.
Yeah, but you really persevered. I mean, especially in your case, Kristen. Because I mean, I remember speaking with you, right, when this stuff like the pandemic started happening, right, and you kind of it was a pretty challenging time for you, right? And I'm so glad you like overcame all that stuff.
Yeah, it was really something else, but it was worth it though. It was. And then just, I guess, as to your point, Stacey, like that's the confidence really, because, especially when you're changing like basically your whole life around, it's like, wow, I mean, am I even going to be good at this? Like, is someone going to want me to work for them? And then I would, for me, it was like just, I got so many rejections. It was unbelievable for months, but, it took one group of people to think I was awesome. And now I have an amazing job. So it's like all of those times that you feel that whatever the rejections are, just that's okay. It's just, you got to just keep going. That's what I say. You got to just keep trucking, keep on going, and it will happen. It totally will.
Yeah. I think the hardest part for me was keeping the momentum up after the course ended, because it's so easy to stay on track of things because like Michael checks in every week to make sure like you've done your homework. But once that's done, it's like, oh, no one's gonna check. Um, and then, so like, I guess just keeping a spreadsheet of all the jobs you've applied to and who you've reached out to, and seeing who's um, replied and where you're getting leads can really help you see like the direction in which your job search is going. And it helps you realize you're kind of not just in the same position, even though it feels like you're not going anywhere for a really long time. Um, I'm really impatient, so like 2 months was a long time for me. So when
Yeah,
I like got my gig, I was like, oh my goodness, I've been slaving away. But yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So I think the
I, I,
same.
I would definitely say that practicing your portfolio presentation is really important, and that is how I ended up with the job offers that I had. And I tapped into my network and I said, can I present my portfolio to you? I have an interview coming up. I just need to talk to someone about this. I need to present it, because doing it in your mind is one thing, but presenting it out loud is something different. You hear where you stutter, you hear where you aren't saying things clearly. And the more you do that, the better you'll get. And who knows, you might be presenting to someone who actually wants to hire somebody. You just didn't realize it, and they'll offer you a job while they might just offer you a job, or they'll know someone who is looking for someone. And it's all through networking and practicing.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that relates to this question, but it came up in my mind.
Cool. So here's something else that we want to learn from you, right? So how can you actually build work experience when most employers are already looking for candidates with whatever 1-2 years of work experience, even for entry-level jobs?
Well, you take BeginX, that's one.
Yeah, but there's also that relatable experience. Like, so Kristen, you were a bartender. That taught you a lot of empathy. It taught you how to read a room. It taught you a lot of skills that you can transfer into and use and say, I have this experience. It's just not directly related to this thing. So I think that y'all have a lot of skills that you already have a lot of the skills. You just need to know how to frame those skills so that they relate to UX and
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good point.
There's also this beta program called Clicked. And they're sort of, what they do is they sort of work with companies to um, help people get real experience. And it's still in beta mode, and it's not the same as BeginX because you're not going to get the same sort of mentorship or guidance. But like it'll be like, oh, Spotify flowchart. Spotify needs people to like make a flowchart for this feature, and then you can just, it's like a 1 week exercise you present at the end. And then that's one thing you could add to your portfolio, and you'd be like, look, I did work experience with Spotify. It was 1 week, but hey, it shows initiative and it's legit. It's a real company. So I would totally do that. There was like an Uber pool case study also that they did. It was also like a 2 week thing. Super interesting. I tried it out, but then I couldn't handle like the workload with like all the other things going on, so I dropped out of it. Um, but yeah, just like those little mini projects to add to your portfolio will really help.
So talking about portfolio, in your guys' opinion, how many case studies do you think one needs to actually get a UX job?
3. I think you need 3. And for me, I wanted all 3 of them to be with actual companies. All 3 might not have to necessarily be. At least 2 of them should be, I think.
I think one really good one. Oh, but it's backed up, okay? I spoke to a lot of people and they were like, you have one really good, strong case study. I think you'll get interviews with this. And you know what? I didn't even get to the interview stage because I just talked to people, and then they were like, hey, do you want to start next week? And I was like, okay.
That's really awesome, but not usual, I would say.
Okay, so FYI, there's this book that Michael's obsessed with. It's called The 2-Hour Job Search. And that is what I used to the letter. And that is how I got so many interviews. So many casual interviews where I'm just like, hey, my name's Samara. I just want to hear about your experience. What do you do? And then usually towards the end of the call, they're kind of like, oh, can you tell me about yourself? Like, are you interested? I'm like, yeah, I'm looking around. And then they're just like, they're like, well, there are a few positions here. They're not posted online. If you'd like, I can refer you. And I'm like, okay, I really like that. Thank you. And then before you know it, it's like talking to HR, you're talking to the design team, and like you're making friends with everyone. And it's like, I don't know, it's like it shows like a lot of research, and it shows that you take initiative because you're just reaching out to people. And I try to hit up 4 people before I jump into a company that I work for. So I talk to a lot of people. Like, after reading Michael's book, well, it's not Michael's book, it's Steve Dalton's book, but Michael's obsessed with it. I talk to like 4 people every day from different companies. And I talked to like 3 people at Chase Bank, and they like looked over my portfolio and they were like, this is good enough to get you interviews, you know, just like make sure you have like answers lined up for these questions if they ask you anything. Yeah. So Michael, that book is key.
Thanks,
You just give them
Mara.
the book, but you don't even need to take the course.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad I didn't have to mention it, right? Because I do mention it like 5 times every time, right? But yeah, I think you did it really well, right? You basically really, you know, dug into the methodology and really executed on it, right? And that's what, for some reason, not everyone does that. Even though you tell them 5 times, they're still like, oh, I'm just going to apply on job boards, you know, and it's, I mean, you can apply job boards like using 15% of your time. That's still fine. But I think, yeah, Mara is like a great example here. So he really like took this to heart and like just executed on that, and did a lot of, basically it's a lot of informational interviews, and then the book tells you all the process, how-tos, what to say, what to ask, what to, you know, kind of, and it's lean, right? It's only like 170 pages, right? So,
Yeah.
So Stacey, do you have any inputs on, any thoughts on how many case studies you think are needed?
Oh God, you know, I had my case study from BeginX. I had a case study that I had done from a self-taught thing, but it wasn't a real client. And then I had a design test, and depending on, you know, like, and that was fine for me. Now that the case study that I did with BeginX was pretty, you know, it was dense. That it took a lot of time. You're going to have to talk through this. You want to modify the case study based on what type of job you're applying for. But I only had those things, and I still didn't have enough time to go through them as in depth as I thought I could. So I you know, like I kind of say, you know, you don't need a lot, but then at the same time, if you don't have the right kind of case study for the job that you're looking for, you know, like then what? So I would agree, probably more agree with Kristen, and say that you would probably want 3, and try and make those case studies, if you're doing your own work, to reflect the kind of work that you're looking for. So if you're doing some of the self-taught stuff and they have a few different kind of projects to pick from, you know, if you're into product design, pick projects like that. So you have that for your case study. If you're more into research, then pick that kind of thing. But I know that my answer is the wrong answer, because I feel like I didn't have enough, but I did have I had this really rich background in design already. And so I had all that experience, which helped me. So yeah, I don't think I'm the normal person. I think that if I didn't have that experience, it would have been harder.
Yeah, but that's a good point. So basically, it's, if you're already coming from a related background, you can sometimes get away with fewer case studies, right? If you're coming from unrelated background, it may take a little bit longer, be a little bit more involved. Usually, like based on like 25 similar events we did, right? So the average number is 3, right? So that's kind of the magic number, right? Again, especially if you don't have a lot of other type of design experience, right? So, but if you have one, what really helps is if it's a really good one, right? Let's say if you magically somehow, let's say you just study somewhere, right? And then you magically get your first entry-level job without any experience at all. But then you have like 2 years working on that company, right? And maybe you only have like 1 real case study, right? So that could still be sufficient, right? But if you have 3 case studies from one-day hackathons for hypothetical projects, that's not going to get you anywhere, right? So it's 3 comprehensive, sizable projects, right? So it's or 1 like really, really long and good one and real, right? So that's kind of, just to recap that. So in your opinion, guys, what do you think employers look for in UX candidates? Like, how do you actually position yourself as an attractive candidate to employers?
For me, it was definitely more, it really felt like it was more the soft skills for me. Like, it was definitely my work and my portfolio spoke for itself. I mean, I'd spent a long time on it. And I updated it 1,000,000 times and I redid it 1,000 times. And by the way, I just want to call something out. I happened to do this and it worked for me. I find sometimes you'll have to talk to one of your designs, specifically one case study. I made like a clickable kind of a PowerPoint to click through one of my case studies, so that it wasn't just the case study. It was like a PowerPoint, kind of like a separate, let's get more involved and I'll show you things because you can't put everything on a portfolio. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes it's like you have one thing on a page and it's like 89% of the users found this to be true. And you're like, wow, that's so tiny. That's such a weird thing that took me so long to figure out. So like, you want to have that to the side so you can talk through why that's the one pretty page that it is. So I had that off to the side and I was asked to show something like that on my interview and I had it prepared. It was like this little like side thing. But yeah, it was soft and being a good fit for me. I think it was more about, would I work well with the small team? It's Johnson & Johnson, but this is like this really small side team of like 10 people. And that's what my experience was. And they liked that, they wanted like it's an intimate setting and it lined up. It aligned with what they were looking for. So I think, yeah, it's a little bit of both, but I think for me, it was the softer empathy, collaborate, being able to collaborate. And that was what they were more interested in for me.
I think also I found like when I was going through my case study, when I would sum up in the end, I would say, look, this happened and it was a real, it really threw us for a loop. I learned a lot. This thing happened that was totally unexpected and it kind of screwed us up a little bit, but I learned this, and this from it. And, or because of this, I learned these other things. I'm not being specific enough, but I would say that it's not just about doing a case study. It's about what you learned from and how you grew from that case study that they're interested in hearing about, because they want to know when you're confronted with a challenge, how you deal with it and what you learn from it. So I would say that that's an important thing in an interview that I would make sure that you call out if they don't ask you about it. And they probably will. So make sure that you have the stuff you learned about written out ahead of time so that if they ask you, you can speak to it intelligently. You're not just like, oh, let me think about that one. Yeah. So I would say that, and definitely be able to say where you put a lot of yourself into something and then call out your team. Say, I had this person on my team that was fantastic in research And she really dug into this. And because of this research, I was able to do A, B, and C from that, because that shows that you can work together and that you value contributions from others too.
Yeah.
So there is another question before we move too far away from case studies and experience and kind of your marketability. Another question from Grace. We touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure we address it, right? So would you say it's critical to have real life experience in your portfolio as case studies, or is it possible to get a job with case studies of hypothetical scenarios that you've created?
I would find a real client to do a case study with and build on it, because they want to see. So okay, it's nice that there are all these hypothetical case studies out there. I'm sure you've seen a million of them. And there are like a million design challenges out there that you can pick from. And even the Google certificate now is like, choose from this and like we'll build a case study around it, but it's not working with a client. And what a lot of interviewers are looking for are products that you worked with a real client on and products that actually shipped. So like products that actually launched. And we're just fortunate enough to have had the client we had last year. And our products are shipping later this fall. So when the interviewer asks you like, can you tell us more about this case study? You can be like, oh, I designed this and I worked with an engineer. They're really keen to hear that you worked with an engineer and that you worked with a product manager, because a lot of their companies are kind of structured in that tripod sort of way, like product manager, engineer, and then product designer. And then you can just tell them, oh, and this product is due to ship like later on this year, because the founder was so impressed with what we did. Yeah.
Stacey, I think you're saying something as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a real life case study shows when you have something that's real, you have to deal with these challenges. And those challenges don't really show themselves with some hypothetical situation because you're just taking the happy path. So I think ideally, yeah, a real case study. I do think it depends on where you feel like you want to jump into UX. If you feel like you are looking for a more senior role, then definitely real life experience. If you're looking for something and you're just starting out, maybe it's not as important, but regardless, you're going to learn more when you're dealing with real people and real challenges, and it makes for a better interview because when you're going to ask, did you validate this? What was the response? How did you change it? And if you're just working in a hypothetical situation, you'd be like, yeah, my mom tested this for me, or my family, like it's all good. And it just doesn't have the same type of gravity because because they love you. Of course, they're going to say it's great.
Kristen, thank you, Stacey.
I don't know. I definitely think you do need a real life experience project or two. As I said, I think one is okay to not be a real life scenario. And that's where you showcase, as Stacey, like to Stacey's point, the one that you kind of hypothetically made up. Why not totally speak to exactly what you want to do with that one, right? Because that's your chance to do it. But you absolutely, I believe you do need to have real life projects in there. Like definitely, at least two. You should have two of them. And it's weird though. Like I didn't find too many people, and I interviewed a lot, and no one really seemed to care one way or another whether something was brought to fruition or not. It was really more about. But again, I was not going for a senior position. I was pretty much just breaking into the industry. So that wasn't the thing that seemed to matter to anyone. It was more like, how do you think? How do you operate? And like, how do you get along with people? And how would you be able to make something better? How do you fit? It was more about the way that I thought and the way I deal with stuff that was more important than like, did this person ever end up making this product or not. So yeah, I would say if you're going for a senior position, I do think that probably would be a question. But if you're just breaking in, I think it's just more about them wanting to feel you out and see where you're at.
So another quick question from the audience, right, that I just want to briefly answer, and you guys can also provide some additional input. So do these case studies need to be paid projects, or can they be from volunteer projects? Do the case studies need to prove their market value profit? So just to quickly touch on that, right, the answer is, yeah, volunteering is totally fine. That's a great hack for building experience because you want to remove that barrier, right? If you're not hireable right away, right, you kind of want to remove that barrier and build that experience up, right? That's what I'm like always saying, even to all our students and alumni, right? It's much better to just work pro bono and volunteer for 6 months or something like that, right? And then get a high-paying, great job versus applying and clicking the apply button for 6 months or probably 2 years, right? And then just repeating the same strategy and then complaining that nobody hires you, right? So it's because, you know, basically just make yourself more marketable, right? And do you guys have any additional thoughts? Okay. I guess you like my recap.
No, that just was like the perfect answer. Volunteer projects are great. Like I have a friend that actually she volunteered. How she got her job was she had a couple of case studies and they were all volunteer work, and it was something for COVID. It was like this really awesome kind of like COVID response. She just signed up to volunteer, and it looked great. And you know, who doesn't love someone who wants to give their time to help somebody else out? So you're kind of like, that's a great thing to talk about too on an interview. It's a great like conversation starter, you know? So I would say yes.
And a quick question. So Mara, I think someone asked, Trevor is asking you, can Mara mention the Spotify, et cetera, service she was using to find quick real world project? I think you mixed up the two things. So Spotify was one part, and then quick real project was, I think it was Click or Click Quick. What was it, Mara? Can you just put it in the chat as well?
It was Click. I'll find the link. Hold on. I'll find the link.
Okay. You don't have to do it right now. We can just you can just post it later sometime.
Okay.
But yeah, Click basically, and then Spotify. I think you just used you listened to a lot of podcasts. You mentioned, right?
I did listen to a lot of podcasts on them, but they did have a project on Click with Spotify. It was like make a user flow for Spotify for like this specific like problem or something. But it was like a 3-day project, you know, and then you present at the end. It's like really short, and it's like it doesn't show like the entire UX process, but it is a little project that you can add to your portfolio to sort of like beef it up a little bit. It's not a full case study. That one wasn't anyway, and that one I think is still ongoing or just started. I'm not sure. You might be able to catch it. But they always have like new projects coming up.
Okay, cool. So Trevor, hope that answers your question. And just kind of to quickly touch on that, right? So a lot of people, I think, especially if you're coming from the visual design side, where you have portfolios with lots of stuff, right? Lots of different mini case studies, right? So here the key part is comprehensive, sizable process, right? So and also keep in mind that if you, let's say, volunteer, for example, you want it to look good on your resume also, right? Because if you do something for a week, it can probably be a good, potentially it could be a good case study. I don't know, depending how much, if you like work 90 hours per week or something like that, maybe it would be a good case study. But you also want to think about your resume, right? So you probably want to start and volunteer somewhere to make sure you have that experience on your resume, right? Because if you have something for 3 days in your resume, it's not going to do much, right? But even though it could be useful for your portfolio potentially. Right. So next question is, what do you guys think are the top 3 things of an effective portfolio, in your opinion?
Sorry, come again? What are the
top 3 things for an effective portfolio? So not just case studies that we kind of touched on, but just portfolio in general. What do you think makes the top 3 things that make your portfolio effective?
I think like the number one thing is to be able to explain, first of all, what part you had in that project, what specifics you added to benefit that project, and be able to explain the decisions that you made. Like, so, don't just stick a screenshot of a wireframe up in there that you can barely see. That's like just a zoomed out, and just be like wireframes, as the title. Like, it's like, everyone knows what wireframes are. Why are these special? Like, why did you create them in this way? Just a little explanation of everything that you did.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing.
Sure.
I just remembered there was three things, and I only said 2. I just wanted to prove that I can count. So the third thing I would say is just, basically just make it readable. Don't make it all sloppy mess, and, like nice and organized, and keep it simple. People don't have, they don't want to scroll for hours and hours and read a ton of text. So make sure it's not just a bunch of words everywhere. People like to look at something. So make it visually pleasing somehow. But that would be it. Those are my 3.
Well, I have one thing. I have a thing that I think is really important. I think what you'll find is there's a lot of people with portfolios. If we're just talking about our online portfolio at this point, I'm assuming this is what we're talking about. There's a bunch of them out there. So I do think it's important for you to weave in some of your personality, because if you're not doing that, you're going to look like everybody else, and there's not going to be anything. There could be nothing in there that catches their eye that makes you feel like they can work with you as a team member. So I do think it's important, if you just like sniff everything all the time and everything is sniffy to you, then say you sniff everything. Whatever. I know that sounds weird, but
that's amazing, Stacey. I have to say that's like.
But I think it's worth that. There's you can put a little bit about you in your about you section, and you can talk about how you do UX, but also talk about how you I love walking your dog because there's so much stuff to sniff outside or whatever. That's my answer.
What is going on over there?
And that's one thing. But I think it's important.
I agree with you.
Stacey, I sniff.
I do. I like sniffing. It's my favorite.
I agree. I think inject some of your personality in your online website. Make sure to have all your links working. Make sure you have your LinkedIn, your email, your resume, your contact info. Just make it really easy for them to not say no. So just have everything you could possibly think of. I used to, at other jobs, I used to build a project for them before I even applied. So when I did hook up with someone on LinkedIn that worked at that company, I'd be like, hey, here's a project I did, plus my resume, plus my salary. Just make it so easy for them to say yes. And then before you know it, HR reaches back and be like, hey, you made a project for us? That's so sweet of you. We took a look. We really liked it. And so, and then they're like, do you want to come in for an interview? And you're like, okay, yeah, for sure. So make it really hard for them to say no. Just make it really easy for them to say yes.
Well, to your point, Mara, I think it's I was more thinking similarly, but just make it easy for them to navigate. Don't, nobody wants to deal with where's the back button? I don't how do I get to this part, or just, like I said, simple is better.
Mm-hmm.
And just make everything a really really easy, bold statement so that it's very clear, and you only are saying what you need to say without like a ton of other ridiculous stuff around it. Like no one wants to read all that. I mean, do you? I don't. Like sometimes I look at something and I'm like, nah, because it's too much crap to read. So
keep it juicy.
Yeah, just like really like I feel like it was there was a mentor that I had once who said, I think it was actually Darren, but like he was like, it's like a news headline, like you want it to be like, whoa, what's next? What like every title of a project was, I treated it like as though it was a headline of a news story. But, in a way, just so that people were interested enough to keep going. But yeah, so that's what I would say. Simple and keep it short. But, as Stacey said, like do show some of your personality, but you can still do that and keep it short and keep it simple,
Yeah, and what is also kind of a good practice that I would typically see is also make sure you have this like executive summary in the beginning, right? Because a lot of people basically won't have time to like read through everything. They'll just scan. And if it's hard to figure out and understand what you did for who and why, they may just go on to the next portfolio, right? So make sure you have that very clear and easy to find. So the UX of your portfolio should be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so another question that we have here from the audience is any resume or LinkedIn tips that you guys can recommend?
LinkedIn is how I got my job. LinkedIn is a very amazing tool. It was, I suggest, like, I don't know if anyone here has like a friend, or maybe you guys are this friend, maybe you're someone here. I'm not great at wording sometimes things to make me sound as amazing as I am. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm not the best. So I did have someone help me a little bit with, in other words, really just take things that you did at other jobs and really like blow them out of the water with like how that relates to UX. Like my bartending job, I think I was like, well, I managed the bar, but it was all about the wording. Like I said, I was like, I don't remember, but I just, I made it sound really amazing. So I think that's my suggestion is, even if like, say, I don't know, like you worked at a grocery store, like you were like a facilitator who facilitated things along, for a different location. Like you were ringing someone up and they were taking the bag and going with it. Like just find how to word things in a way where it just makes you sound like amazing. That's what I think. Honestly, like that might sound weird, like, and like whatever, but it's true. Because there's so many things that relate to UX. Like there's so many things. Any job you did, I'm happy to even connect with any one of you guys listening and be like, I can tell you where there's UX there. Like, because that's going to be your story eventually. You're going to talk about that later in life. Like someone's going to ask where you've come from, and you're going to have to find those points that make the UX sense, and you can point them out and then speak to them instead of being afraid to say that you did that job. Because for me, I was afraid to say I was a bartender not afraid, but I was like, how could I, you don't want to focus too much on it, but like I found points that made sense to where it made sense to UX. And then I felt more confident talking about it.
And remember, UX is not just people interacting with computers. It's user experience that can be a situational, it can be an event, it can be so many things. And I think that people get the tunnel vision and thinking that user experience is simply a human interacting with a computer or a monitor, and it's not. It's so much more. So make sure that you know that when you're relating these skills, and you're golden. Like just like Kristen said, it's valuable. Yeah. I think LinkedIn, if you make sure that you put in the right kind of keywords and you pull out certain skills that are marketable, you will get a lot of so LinkedIn is valuable that way, and these recruiters tend to have a lot of contract work. So if you do need more experience and you have recruiters asking you to about opportunities, like, it's worth trying. A lot of contract stuff does turn into full-time stuff. So LinkedIn is great that way. If you have if you do pull out the right kind of information.
And even the interviews with the recruiters, right? They're helpful too.
Mm-hmm.
Having to have an interview with anyone is helpful. So
yeah.
For the resume, I would suggest writing out your achievements for every job that you've done rather than just saying what you did at each job. Because highlighting how you were valuable to that company and how you made an impact there is much more important to them than what you did there. So if you can showcase that on your resume, maybe like 1, 2, 3 lines or something for each job, I think you're gold.
Thank you, Mara. So I know this is really, really fun, and the time just flies. So we only have about 10 minutes max before we have to jump to the formal Q&A part, right? I want to cover as many of you guys' questions in the Q&A section as possible, even though we already addressed a lot of them throughout the conversation. Here's another one, actually another audience question. So touching on LinkedIn as well, how much do you think creating LinkedIn posts matters in creating an online presence? Did you guys do that?
I think it helps. I don't think it's a game. Like, I don't think, if you don't, I don't think it'll be a problem, but it always helps. Even if you're sharing something that you found really valuable, it shows that you're reading and you're involved in the field, and you're researching, and you're curious, and you're sharing it. So I mean, even if you're just sharing something that you read that you thought was interesting, I think it does help. I think it helps.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, LinkedIn, think of it as like your Facebook for like people trying to look for people who want jobs. Like, you're obviously not going to give all of these people, they're not going to your Facebook and your Instagram. So this is like your chance to be showcasing who you are, I think. Like, I'll post up things all the time. Like, I don't know, it was really funny. There was like Pantone Colors put up this post of like all these different beers and what their Pantone colors were. And I'm like, that's great. Like, who doesn't love a beer? And like, whatever, just you can be a little bit more loose there. And also following the groups are cool. I don't know, I've actually joined a few groups on LinkedIn, and you can meet people that way. You can connect that way, especially with how things are so remote. You can like share interests with people. I think it is good. I think it's good because for no other reason than like people are seeing you. When you post something, that means people are seeing you. And you want to kind of make a presence everywhere you go, especially when you're really trying to find a job,
So what do you guys think are most effective channels for actually looking for work, right? So basically by channels, like we have distribution channels, marketing channels, right? So basically your search strategies, right? So tactics, like you can mediums, whatever. You can do networking, you can just focus on job boards, you can apply on company websites, you can do all kinds of things. But what do you think is most effective in your case?
Networking. It is the way to get a job. Somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was Mara, that they don't post jobs that they're looking for. Quite often they'll wait to see if someone they know can recommend someone. So there's so many jobs out there that just aren't posted, and it's almost, by the time it's posted, it's too late. sometimes I feel like then then you have to work that much harder to try and get noticed. So I would say, please tap your networks and like authentically tap them, in a way that feels like, hey, I need your help. Can I present this to you? Can you give me some feedback? Not just, hey, you have any jobs for me kind of thing. Like it really depends on how you work.
Even though that's really what you want to know.
And it might be, but I think that I just don't, I think that there's a way to go about asking for help and people will offer more and it won't feel awkward if done appropriately. So,
Yeah, that's why I was like emphasizing the science behind marketing and sales, because this is basically, this job search is pure marketing and sales, right? And you really want to study that, understand that, and practice with that, because you never want to kind of like Stacey mentioned and Kristen mentioned, right? You do want to know if they have a job for you, but if you just start approaching people and asking them for jobs, it's like, meeting someone, like in dating, right? You just meet someone and like, will you marry me? Like, well, how about we date a little bit, right? And then figure and maybe see if it's the same thing, right? So you have to just build the relationship, right? And maybe do these like Mara did, like informational interviews, and build relationships. Maybe you click with someone, then you can get a job through them potentially. So I'll let you guys continue answering this. I know I kind of jumped in.
No, you're fine.
Any other channels? I think so. Stacey mentioned networking. Mara, Kristen.
I know the least effective way is applying through the career page on the company website. I have never once gotten a legit interview from ever doing that. So I stopped that a long time ago. I thought it was the biggest waste of time. And like those forms are so outdated. They don't look like they've been touched in centuries. And it's crazy because some of the companies you apply to, they're massive, and then you go to their career pages and you try and apply through their website, and it's like the worst experience ever. Like some of them don't even have like save and continue later, and then you have to restart the whole thing. Like, what is this? It's so much better to do what Stacey says, just network, and it's like so much more worth it.
Cool. Thank you. So I want to say, here's a good question we have. Yeah, maybe you guys know. I don't know if it's something that you know or not, but Daphne Lee has a question. So are there known companies that are more open to taking junior UXers, except for programs for college interns? Do you guys know about any companies maybe that have such a reputation?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Companies
any known companies that are more open to taking junior UXers?
I think doesn't Google do it? Like I think they have and I thought Amazon even had sort of like some program with they definitely have interns. Junior, I don't know. Junior is such a weird thing. That's a weird job. I'm not even quite sure I even know what that even is, really. It seems to me that you're either interning or you're just doing the job. Right? I don't know what the difference necessarily, I guess, is. In my experience, I don't know. Like, I had interviews that were for junior design positions and then ones that weren't, and they seemed so similar. Exactly the same. So I guess just go for don't even go for the junior. It's not, I think that's just something some companies say maybe to pay somebody less money. I'm not sure. I really don't know what it means. But the answer that I have is that I know that like Google and Amazon, they do have an internship program if you're just looking to get experience, and they do pay as well.
Thank you, Kristen. Mara, Stacey, have you run into companies that are kind of more famous for hiring more junior folks?
I think it really depends. Like, Okay, so for like startups, it depends on when they get their funding. So like even if they're like in a Series B, Series C, or Series D um, funding stage, and they're like in their hyper growth stage, they're more likely to be hiring junior UXers at that time, because at that point, when they're already hiring for like, well, when they've reached like a Series D funding, they've already kind of built out their core UX design team. So they'll have like your senior product designer slash product designers, and then that product designer, once they get funding, they'll be able to hire like a junior UX designer. So once they build out their core, then they can hire junior UXers. Um, that's for startups specifically. I'm not quite sure about larger companies, um, like more corporate companies that have been around for a while, like Deloitte. I don't think they really have junior. I think it's just like UX designer. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the junior thing. Try not to get caught up. I would try not to get caught up in junior necessarily. I mean, if it's because you think you don't have enough experience, you might just want to have a conversation with someone that can say, look, you have a lot of experience. It might not be in the specific thing, but like I said, the transferable skills make you a real valuable hire. Just try not to think about yourself as junior, because you're just going to put yourself in a situation where you can.
And if you do eventually get to like an interview stage where you're negotiating, and the title is junior, be like, I'd love to take it, but I have an offer from another company. Could we maybe negotiate my title change to be UX designer for growth purposes? Because that's like, what other companies offering, and I really like this company, but they're offering me growth, and from a practical standpoint, I really need to take that company. Just like, I don't know, charm them or something. Sorry.
And if you guys did not know, Mara is offering a negotiations course. And just kidding. So yeah, I love all those stories and how you voice them over. So and also just kind of honestly to share with everyone in the audience, right? So there are not too many pure junior roles, right? So that's why you should really not try to market yourself as junior ever, because often what happens, if you position yourself as junior, that's how they will be looking at you, right? If you're not positioning yourself as junior, or if you make yourself less junior by building experience and volunteering and doing all kinds of work, and just kind of not just sitting and applying, but like keep building yourself up all the time, right? Then you're becoming less junior, right? And then you can also get a higher level role, right? Sometimes you can even get to like a mid-level role if you have sufficient, case studies and good experience, right? So it's that's like kind of a big mistake. Like if you search on Indeed, for example, for like junior UX designer versus UX designer, junior will be like probably like, I think I did it a few times, right? So probably like 5% maybe, or max 10% of the amount number of jobs that's for all your designers. So essentially, instead of positioning yourself as junior, work on making yourself less junior. So that's kind of based on our experience what works much better. So we have another question. So I wanted to ask you briefly about the interviewing process. I know we can probably talk about that for like hours, right? But just to summarize, what should candidates expect during the interview process? What did you guys do?
I mean, they usually start off with like a quick intro, tell me about yourself, and they tell them they tell you a little bit about themselves and the company also. Try and frame it in your mind as a conversation, like a design conversation, like you're just having a dialogue with another person, because then the conversation will move more smoothly. Try not to follow a script in your head. And they will always ask you about your design thinking process, regardless, and always always have questions to ask at the end, because that just shows interest in the company and the position. So never end the conversation by just being like, no, you answered all my questions. Play like 20 questions with them, and flatter them. Ask them about like how they got to where they are, and like their story. They like that. And then maybe afterwards you can be like, can I have some advice? And then they can be your mentor too. Sorry.
Thank you, Mara. Another story from Mara. So Kristen, Stacey, what was the interviewing process like? Maybe you can also talk about the different stages, types of interviews.
Yeah. I'll just go really quick. So I had a few, and some went really, really well, and some went really horrible. And I think that you have to be able to understand the language that they're using when they're asking questions about your case study. So if you don't know what, say you don't know what validate means, like, did you validate this? What is that? What did that look like? How did you blah, blah, blah. If you're confused about what that means, you might have done it, but you still can't answer that question because you don't understand what they're asking. So I would say it's really important to understand how they're going to ask the questions. It's really important to present your case study to a few people, or case studies to a few people, before you go into the interview. It really does make a difference. Like, practice that thing as much as possible. And so I don't know how some, when I was taught to have a portfolio, an online portfolio. But when I'm in an interview, I'd have a case study that I presented, and I wasn't showing my portfolio, wasn't showing my online portfolio. I was showing a case study and walking through that case study. And when I did it, I put it in Keynote, and I just went through it that way. I had speaker notes in there. I knew what to say and when. It was animated, etc. So I would say that you would definitely want to have something like that, rather than just scroll through your online portfolio and try and explain it, because online portfolios are pretty general. You want your specific case study to speak to that job. And I feel like I'm not answering this question at all right. I'm like totally off track, aren't I?
Well, I think your off track is not bad, right? You kind of touched on like what is important. It looks like you're basically talking about portfolio presentation, right? So the PDF or Keynote or whatever, like the actual slide deck of kind of same thing that what you have in your online portfolio, but organized in a slide deck, right? And maybe with selected specific case studies. So that's definitely a very common phase of the interview process, these portfolio presentations. Kristen, what was your interview process like?
It was definitely always very similar, where they told you about their company for a little bit, and then they wanted to know about you. And then that's just, as cliche as it is, that's how every interview is going to go. So you need to really just pick out points that you want to feature about yourself, really. Just bullet point some things out that you really want somebody to know about yourself, and be authentic. You could be yourself. Like, you don't have to act, I don't know. UX is we're not trying to be lawyers. Okay. We're not trying to be CEOs of a bank. Like, you can be yourself, and you don't have to be all nervous and scared to, talk a little bit casually. That's even better, because that's how you need to be when you're talking to people in UX, especially if you're ever participating user interviews. So it's good to sound like you're talking to a friend in that case. And then you have to I would say, find a case study that, it would be good to speak to all of them for sure, but there's going to be one. They're going to want maybe you to walk through one. And the slide deck, as I said, I had off to the side. That's just for like extra information that you might have about that particular case study. and they just want to see you walk through it, and you'll just go through it, and you'll just explain how the process went. And that's kind of how they all went. It was like, they'll throw you a couple of curveball questions. For Johnson & Johnson, I think one of my questions was like, what do you dislike the most about the job, about UX? And I was like, well, honestly, when stakeholders want me to do something that I know isn't going to work, but I have to show them just to provide the proof that it didn't work, it kind of, whatever, just find whatever. You're not going to know what they're going to ask you sometimes, but always talk about yourself, find things about yourself that you want to feature, and then learn how to speak through one of your case studies in detail.
Thank you, Kristen. So we're gonna be wrapping up soon. We're already in the kind of formal Q&A portion. But I do want to take a few more questions from the audience, right? Because we want to make sure we answer as many of them as possible. So there's another question from Molly. When looking for a satisfying UX role, what elements of a job posting and company do you look for? And do you find any sort of correlation between how interesting or appealing the role is to you and level of pay?
I think that's an interesting question, and I think you'd have to do a little bit of research about the company to know if it's something that I think that would tell you more than the job posting, to be honest. What kind of products they make and what, any kind of information you can get from them will probably tell you more than the job posting. But I will say this about job postings. I think that UX is still kind of new, and it is something that people feel like they need to have in their companies, but a lot of people still don't understand what it is. So they'll post these UX jobs, and what they really want is a designer that can do prototypes and wireframes, and they're not testing them on users. They're giving them to clients so that they can get approval, and then they can build a website. It's not about user experience. It's about design and UI. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong about that, except for that it's being presented as a UX job. So make sure you ask questions. If they don't talk about the actual UX strategies and the goals of this job, or what you'll be doing within the job, and you don't see anything that's UXy in that, it all feels like designing and validating simply for a client, not for a user, that should give you a red flag. I had that very experience myself, so I'm saying this from my own experience.
Oh my goodness.
Ask those questions. If they're saying, oh yeah, it's email design, or well, I was like, oh wait, hold everything.
Yeah, good points. So we have another question from Brian Graves. So the question says, I have a strong management and team lead background, but truly enjoy doing the work and being an individual contributor instead. Transitioning to a new field, I expect to start at a lower position and actually want that, but how does one overcome the fact that hiring managers see it as taking a step back and automatically disqualify you from these roles?
Well, no one's disqualifying you from the roles. You can get whatever, don't look at it like that. I would say you have skills, so showcase those skills and get hired in a great job. I wouldn't, you don't want to be aiming for like a low job, like a job that you think's below you. Like for me, for example, I'm a good example of that, right? Because I was very new to coming from like work, service industry, whatever, to UX. I could have positioned myself like, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to go for whatever's the bottom bar. I'm just going to take whatever I can get, because I'm not someone who's been in any kind of company kind of environment. But I didn't look at it like that. I looked at myself as just as good as any other candidate. And if you see yourself like that, then everybody else will too. So you're not going to take a low paying job that's below you. You're going to get a great job and transition like that. So that's that's my answer to that.
Any other thoughts? Thank you, Kristen. Stacey, Laura?
I wouldn't lowball yourself. Um, yeah, I wouldn't do that. No, that's not a good idea. Um, you need to come from a place of strength, I think. You can't come from a place of fear in like everything that you do. Um, and when you get into that mindset, everything kind of just flows afterwards. So just like take baby steps, be curious, just be eager to learn and grow, but don't think you're not good enough for a certain position. Um, because you'll find that there are a lot of companies out there that are really open-minded and will be able to help you transition smoothly into a role that is at your level and not something that is lesser than what you think you deserve.
Thank you, Mark. Stacey, anything else?
Yeah, I think they got it. I agree with what they said, so I'm good.
Okay, cool. So that's cool. There's another question. So Andy reposted this, so I am not sure who exactly this is from, but this is an interesting question. In your opinion, do you need a degree for UX research or any other UX position? So I know this is probably a pretty quick question. I'll hold my thoughts until you guys provide yours.
No, you don't need a degree. No, you don't need a degree. No.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would say no.
I mean, the only reason I would get a degree is if you lack the confidence without one. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you feel like you can't say that you can do it unless you have a degree, then get the degree. But you can without. So you don't need it.
I agree with Stacey. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. You can like take classes on like Springboard, like go to like, is it Springboard or like and just do that stuff at home. It's like do it on your own, but then I do think you need some mentorship, which is why like a program like Michael's is so great. Like I don't think you can, I think it's a very rare thing to be able to just go online and just teach yourself and then just get a job. I think it's super important to have to work in that team environment with people for a client. Like I really think you have to do that. Do you need a degree? No, but you do need something like a program like Michael's program or something like that shows you how it's going to be. And then you can speak to those designs like from a real life perspective. And that's what will get you a job, I think. But no need for a degree. Just have something to show for your knowledge that you have.
Thank you, Kristen, and everyone. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Even though for UX research, it can be a little bit more common to have like advanced degrees like human-computer interaction and PhDs that they love. But that said, it's still, I know plenty of researchers who do not have that, right? So it's definitely, it's an advantage, but it's a trade-off, right? I don't know, do you want to spend 2 years more or 4 years more if you already have a bachelor's or a PhD, right, to potentially get it, or can you just hack your way into UX research, right? And then maybe it's not going to be as glamorous overall initially, but then you just grow and get paid along the way as well, right? So it's and for UX design, yeah, that's you definitely, because obviously, like I would say majority of UX designers don't have a UX because there was not such thing before as a UX degree, right? The closest thing would be like human-computer interaction, probably. And yeah, you basically need portfolio, you need skills and practice, tons of practice with interview and just making yourself hireable, right? Focusing on that's why we kind of say about this whole starting with the end in mind. So instead of just, again, jumping and learning and then doing and kind of going this traditional way of just learning a bunch of stuff, figure out, okay, who do employers need? Who do they want? Like what competencies do you need, right? And then focus specifically on that, and you can do this 10 times faster, right, than a degree. All right, so, okay, so last question, and then we'll have to wrap up. So there's one question right here. What are some tips you can give for design challenges for interviews? From Martina. Thanks, Martina. Sounds like you love those, Stacey.
Design challenges are tough because they say, 6 hours, and you know that they expect you to work. Design challenges are tough. But I think that, okay, but to answer the question, they give you a challenge. Make sure that you feel confident to ask all the questions that you have to get all the information you need so that you can solve that as best as possible. Don't feel like you're asking too many questions. Don't feel like you're nagging. You're gathering data so that you can solve this as best as possible. Please ask those questions. Otherwise, you're designing and you're like, not sure if you're doing the right thing, but you're already kind of halfway through it. And then you're just like, shoot, I should have asked. So ask the questions first. That's my biggest thing.
Yeah, keep in mind, I think the question could potentially also talk about challenges, not just take-home challenges, but also like whiteboarding challenges, like basically live one as well.
Okay. Well, for the whiteboard challenge, same thing, but you definitely want to talk about, you want to ask all the questions that you have so that you can gain insight, but also cover the things that you're not, like go over the things that you're not going to do. Say like, well, this, I'm going to kind of concentrate right here. It seems like this is a section of where this challenge is specifically speaking to you. You know, within the user flow, you're going to blow out this section. Don't feel like you can do the entire thing. Does that make sense to you guys?
Kristen, I think you were saying something.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, just make sure that you don't try to do too much. Sometimes there's a saying, I feel like, I forget which one of my mentors told me this, but it might have been you, Michael, like too much information is no information. So you don't want to try and do it all. I would say just try and make something, focus on something and really make it clear and ask the questions like Stacey said. And also that looks great because you should be doing that in a job. Because you want to be very specific because you have a goal and you have someone you're creating for and making an experience for. So you have to know the information before you go down that path. So they're not annoying and they're actually making you look better as a potential employee by wanting to know specifics and making the product as best you can.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
So
I do want to say one thing about this, Michael, because I think it's really important. When you're doing a whiteboard challenge, please talk through your decision-making process and interact with the people that are giving you that whiteboard process or that challenge. Say, okay, I'm going to go through, I'm thinking this, and because of that, I'm going to thinking this. How do you guys feel about that? You know, collaborate with them when you're doing a whiteboard challenge. It's all about communicating, talking while you're drawing or whatever. Please don't just stand there with your back to them and do your whiteboard challenge without saying anything.
Awesome.
Sorry,
awesome.
that's all I had to say about that.
No worries. Yeah, definitely. These are great points. And yeah, definitely do a lot of practice with the whiteboarding challenges, especially. So those are more common than the take-home challenges. Take-home challenges sometimes also have kind of bad rap as well.
Yeah.
So you would probably have whiteboarding challenges more frequently. You just need to basically don't expect to wing it. You have to do a ton of practice, get a lot of feedback and support from others, right, to make sure that you're good. So this has been really good, and I hope it's been really insightful, but we do have to wrap up. So I hope you guys enjoyed the event. So let me also quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since everyone is talking about it, since this may be a great opportunity for some of you, okay? So, and I noticed a couple of people asked as well. So basically what Beginnix is, it's a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX without quitting their jobs, right? And so far we've ran 11 cohorts and helped over 100 people or so transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, JP Morgan, Facebook, many others, and including companies of our speakers today as well. So recently, we've also been ranked by SwitchUp as the best UX program, which was really nice to hear. Our advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, The Economist, and many others. Who the program is best for? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways, and without quitting their current jobs, right? So there are very few options to actually be able to do that. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. It's quite a bit of effort. What you gain after completing the program is you build not just the hard skills, but the critical software skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and get ready to land the UX job, right? And in fact, because the grads have done so well, we now offer a money-back guarantee, right? So you either land a UX job or you get your tuition back, plus an extra $200 on top of that, right? So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, what you need to do is you can learn more at beginx.com. So you can just go ahead and check it out. So with that said, we run many different types of events. So we'll keep you guys updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter. That is usually sent every few weeks or so. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, our wonderful speakers, for all the awesome insights you shared. It was a huge pleasure to have you here. So if anyone has any other questions, we'll hang around for like 2-3 more minutes and maybe answer any additional last questions. Okay, so just feel free to quickly upvote those or anything else that is already available in the chat, because I know it's been a long day for everyone, right? So I want to make sure we let these guys go in a few minutes.
Well, I just want to say thank you everybody for coming to listen, because that shows initiative, and that's cool. Making a change like that is hard to do, but the fact that you're even just here listening is really great. And if I could do it, all of you guys could do it. It's you can do it. So that's all. It's my little.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, I echo that. I definitely echo that. And y'all are great for coming. And if you want to message me on LinkedIn, or if you want some help or anything, I'm available.
I'll ditto what Stacey said.
Yeah, Michael, should we put our information?
Yeah, sure. If you want, you can put your LinkedIn information, or people can just look you up, right? Because we have both your first and last names here. But of course, it would make it easier. So if you want, you can just share your LinkedIn as well. If you want, if you're open to people reaching out to you.
For sure.
I see one other quick question. So maybe you guys can provide. Now it's not exactly a background, but maybe you can provide some insights. How might someone translate academic level research into a UX project or case study? Should this be done? What are your thoughts on that? I know this is not exactly you, but maybe you have some thoughts on it.
I think any kind of research, if you can, I think all skills are transferable for UX. So if you have researching skills, whether it's knowing how to research things, that's transferable as a UX researcher. There's people that are in UX that don't know how to research things. They don't know the process. They don't know how to they don't even know how to start. Their brains don't work that way, maybe. So I think any kind of research skills you have are UX research skills. Research is research. Am I right about that? And so there's that. And then there's also, depending on what the research is, I'm sure that you can transfer some of how you ask the questions, or any kind of process in aggregating that information and then using it to come up with solutions. All of that is transferable. It's all UX.
Thank you, Stacey. Yeah, this is really okay. So I know you guys have to run. Any other last minute words of wisdom? Anything you want to share or say to the audience?
Y'all can do it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
just go for it.
You can.
Yeah.
It's
It
worth
seems
it.
a lot right now, but once you start, it gets so much easier. So just keep chugging along. You'll be fine.
Keep on plugging. That's what my mom always used to say.
And it's so worth it. I mean, it's anything worth doing is going to be difficult at times, but you know, if this is a goal and that you're working towards achieving it, you know that it's worth it. So if you're interested in it, research more about it, talk to Michael or somebody, find out if, if it's truly for you. And if so, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you guys again so much. It was a huge pleasure, and thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your time, and we hope you found this very insightful. I did. All right, cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.